So this is a photo in my senior year of high school, and one of the women in the photo is Lori Darvis. And Lori Darvis, I give her so much credit even today. And we just celebrated our 40th anniversary, and every anniversary she comes back to Cleveland, and we always have a great time. Lori Darvis is a Caucasian woman, a journalist who had the courage to compete for the cheerleading squad. And she was on the cheerleading squad with us the entire 3 years that we were there. Once we graduated and off to college, we lost connection. But I happened to be at a conference maybe 10 years after we graduated from high school. Today, she lives in Indianapolis. She's a wife, a mom of two amazing daughters, and she and I talk regularly. We met because of busing. My mother and my grandparents both worked for Cleveland Public Schools in the 1970s. And I remember the conversations about busing or not busing, stories about Judge White, Judge Battisti. Didn't really think about what that would mean for me until the winter of 1978, which was also the worst winter in the city of Cleveland. But that was the year of the pilot for busing. And as a part of that, I was bused on bus 635 from Tarkington to Terminal. And what I vividly remember is getting up extra early to catch those buses because we had to catch those buses literally. I recall the time being along the lines of 6:15 a.m. walking up the hill of our street, East 173rd, to the corner of Tarkington and catching the bus. And on the day of busing, the first day for us, I remember it was exciting for us. We were on a bus, we were traveling over to a new school. And when we got there, I remember the rage of some parents surrounding the buses, some of them with protest signs. But behind them, I remember their children looking at and wondering, what is this? We are young people also. And I did not see the rage or the anger from the students, but I did see it in some parents, not all parents, some parents. And Carl of Schuler was diverse because there were also some Puerto Rican families that lived in the community because public housing is right off of West 130th. So there were African American, there were Puerto Rican, and there were Caucasian students. And I remember exiting the bus, some anxiety, some fear, but once we were in the school, we were all students. And all of that anger that we saw outside did not penetrate the inside of the building. My dad, I always say I had a non-traditional dad because he came from the whole Black Power movement and things like that. And he was not as gentle as my mom in coaching us on how to behave once we got there. And my dad essentially was just like, you belong there, you need to be there, go get what you're going for. Basically, that was his message. And everything that you do, always be a lady, hold your head high, and walk proud. Period. Dot. That was his message to my sister and I. My mom, on the other hand, was a bit softer. Go there, express no fear, walk with your head high, you belong. And as a result, I walked into that school. I didn't care what the other students looked like, race, gender, any of that. And we made friends with students. I made friends with students in the school. And in my ninth grade year, I was elected student class president. I grew up on 173rd off of Tarkington, and it's still making me smile even now as I think about it. There are probably 8 to 10 streets in that pocket because we're situated between 480 and Warrensville, right off of Lee Road. There's a huge park, Carouge Park. And so I felt like I knew all the students in our neighborhood because everybody convened at Carouge Park. And one of the things that I jokingly say, but I seriously mean, is that everything that I needed to survive, I learned at Carouge Park. When to be tough, when to have courage, to get up and not cry, where I learned the power of relationships and the power of teamwork, whether it was through tennis, individual or doubles, or swimming, or baseball or softball. We were 90% women owned houses, mothers raising their children. And these mothers, including mine, worked two, sometimes three jobs, and they encouraged us. And the seniors on our street, I now know in reflection, were part of the Great Migration, and they looked after us. They took care of us. This was pre-cell phone, so if we were doing anything we weren't supposed to do, they would call my mom. And I remember those old guys in my reflection as an adult. And I mentioned the Great Migration, and they would have watermelon sitting on the front lawn under very small trees. These were not pecan trees of Georgia or Alabama, but small trees on East 173rd, and it was so family oriented. And even to this day, every one of those persons on that street, there's nothing but love. So many other seniors have gone on, but my childhood circle is my childhood circle. In fact, 14 of us were just together yesterday. I moved on 173rd when I was 11 years old in the fifth grade. Unfortunately, my parents had gone through a divorce. That was also the year the Roots came out, and my parents attempting to work it out. We watched Roots as a family. That was very important to my father, who I mentioned could be radical at times. And because we watched Roots as a family, because we had these seniors, in particular men on our street, very few, but majority that had come from the Great Migration, the sense of family, the sense of resilience, the sense of I can make it and you can too was very much present. The sense of you have to be so much better than other people was very present. It resonates in who I am now. I still hear my own grandparents and our neighbors, and definitely my parents saying, you have to be two steps ahead. You cannot be behind. In order to survive and have resilience, you have to know, you have to be in the know. And those were also the things that we learned in the park from the bullies. If there were bullies at the time, you could not cry if you lost the baseball game. You had to get up. And when we went over to Shuler, when we were bused, irrespective of some of the things that we saw, I had this sense of resilience, this sense of can do, this sense of I know exactly who I am and I belong and I will be competitive here. Uh, it resonates just in who I am even today. I graduated Carl F. Shuler on the National Junior Honor Society, and went over to John F. Kennedy High School. Loved it. My high school years were amazing. Lots of friends, lots of engagement, cheerleading, track, voted Miss JFK. Again, that whole sense of strong identity, but strong sense of team. Everything that I did was teamwork related, just being actively engaged in what's going on in the school, working with other students, working between classes. I remember volunteering for the class of 1982's graduation at what was then called the front row, just being actively engaged and wanting to be involved with what was going on in the schools. I feel like I've been doing DEI since 1978, since before DEI was a thing. We were bused and we went over, and it was the first time I had gone to school with Caucasian students, Puerto Rican students, and we were just that. We were only students. That's exactly what we were. And didn't know anything about the word differences because we were 12, 13 years old. And although I had tacos, for example, before at home, to have authentic tacos when our Spanish class went to an authentic Puerto Rican restaurant was different. It was diversity. It was introduction to a different culture, the sense, the smell, the taste of that authentic food, and really learning some of the things that our students, my fellow students, Caucasian and Hispanic, we're dealing with were the exact same things. And so for me, without even knowing the word diversity at 12, 13 years old, I've been doing diversity since then, respecting that. I had the privilege to go to graduate school as a National Urban Fellow in 1994. And that program was designed specifically for people of color to earn a master's in public administration, public policy. That program was created the same year the Sesame Street was created. in the same years that Head Start were created. Those are the programs that came out of the civil rights movement, the civil rights package to ensure that students could have what they need and compete. For me, being involved with people of color, differences, irrespective, uh, race, gender, creed, nationality, just getting to a level of understanding is something that I've been doing since I was 13 and bust. So much of the civil rights movement was about education. Because when you think about employment and housing, all that stems from education, being aware. And so many of our ancestors, names known and more names unknown, literally risked their lives in the Great Migration to get to the North. And when they got here, they were so completely surprised at what they were met with. But housing, education, employment continue today. Sometimes, if you read some of the research that's out there right now about current, you would think it was 50 years ago. Even during slavery, there's been an advocacy for education to be aware. And one of the primary reasons the slave owners didn't want us to become educated because knowledge opens the mind. Education is central. It is absolutely central. And so many people died and fought for fairness and equity and justice in education. They did not fight for desegregation. Desegregation was a temporary solution that did not get us to where we wanted to be. Because all that happened as a result of desegregation is that the families that could, they sent their children to private schools. There's great diversity in public schools today in suburban districts up through seventh grade. At the point that they get to eighth grade, parents typically, those that can, will transfer them. That's why the population of schools in public schools has declined so greatly. Education is fundamental to everything that we do. It is the only way that we can move forward as a people, as a generation. Everyone needs to understand the power of public education and what it is and make investments in it so that we are wise, we are knowledgeable, and that we can compete in this society.